Instagram and YouTube? Or?
So far just YouTube.
Okay. Awesome.
And now both.
Both Instagram and YouTube are live. Great. So we got a couple minutes before noon. And then at noon, we are going to get into the Flatmaster drum sander. So that's what this live deep dive is going to be about. I don't want to start until noon, so that's what I advertise. But yeah, so we did a few of these live deep dives. I guess it was a full 2 weeks ago, just before the Hamilton show. They went off really, really well. We did them on a lot of the record power products, like the Corona Herald Blaze, the Regent, the accessories, and the Canvax. But today we're doing a little bit different. We're doing it on one of our own products, the Flatmaster here. So can you see the time on there, Kate?
Yeah, it's 11:59.
11:59. So as soon as that says noon, I'm going to get into it. But yeah, so we're going to do it on the Flatmaster today. So basically, the one thing I want to highlight, this is totally live. You guys are encouraged while I'm doing this live to ask questions. So if anybody has any questions during this live session, please just type them out, ask them. Katie will read them off to me, and we'll go from there. So I think is it noon now then, Kate?
It's still 11:59, but
We're close.
somebody on Instagram, has a comment here. It's under my oh dear.
Now you've done it.
I done it. I can't see their name, but they used their Flatmaster today and made some boards flat. They love it.
Hey, that's great. That's the beautiful thing about the Flatmaster is it's one of the only sanders that will make things flat, which we'll get into here pretty well right now. Are we at noon yet?
Yeah, now it's noon.
Now
It's noon now.
Okay, so yeah, today's live deep dive is going to be highlighting our Flatmaster drum sander. I have the 24-inch model in front of me. We have two different sizes. We have an 18-inch and a 24-inch. Now, when I'm at a show, the most common question I get is, they know right away it's a drum sander, but like what makes this sander different compared to a traditional drum sander? So a traditional drum sander, you have a drum on top, you have a power feed in the bottom. It works and looks a lot like a planer. So you have the power feed in the bottom that runs through the drum, and similar action to a planer, except rather than the blade, it has an abrasive drum. While a regular drum sander is a little bit more like a planer, the Flatmaster is a little bit more like a jointer. So that means whenever I'm sanding something, it's always going to sand the high spots first. So let me get a little piece of oak here. This is a piece of oak I found outside. It's been sitting outside for probably 10 years, but it's in pretty rough shape, but that's okay. You see it's not terribly flat. I don't know if you can tell on the camera, but that's got a little bit of a drop. But what will happen is it looks to me like I've got, let me look at it again, a high spot that kind of goes on an angle sort of along here. So when I pass this board through, just like a joiner, I'm going to hit the high spots first. So every pass I make, that's going to get flatter and flatter. So let me turn this on. I'll make 2 passes here, and we'll take a look at where we're at with this little piece of oak. Very quiet. Let me plug it in here.
That was, while you're working on plugging that in, the person who was using their Flatmaster just this morning, that was Barry from West Virginia.
Oh, very cool. Well, I'm glad that you're joining us, Barry. That's great. All right, let's turn this baby on, and we'll do a little sanding. There's one pass. Okay. So if we look at that there, we've got a high spot on each one of these ends on that piece of oak. There's kind of a low spot that goes through the middle here. So this board, as you can tell, it did have a bit of a rock. So that's 2 passes there. Now the grit I have on the Flatmaster, I didn't double check this, but I'm quite sure this is a 120 grit. Now another thing that is interesting about the Flatmaster, a lot of people will ask, how do you adjust the depth of your cut? Say I want to remove more material per pass. So you don't adjust that by moving the drum up or down. You set the drum once, you set it to a 220 grit, This is the 120, but that 220 grit, you're going to set so it's just below the table. And what will happen when I turn this drum on, the sandpaper is on Velcro, and we'll get a little bit deeper into that in a minute here. But it's on Velcro here. So what that means is, you've got a hook and you've got a loop. When this drum gets turned on, centrifugal force will lift that sandpaper off the drum. So we've always got an air gap between the drum and the wood. Well, it means a couple things. One, to adjust my depth of cut, I don't move the drum up and down. What I do is I change my grit. So with this 120 grit, I'm removing about 7/1000ths of an inch per pass. The way I know that 7/1000 is that's the size of the grain of sand approximately that's on that 120 grit. So if I were to put a 60 grit on there, I'm going to remove nearly a 32nd of an inch per pass, whereas if I put a 220 grit on there, I'm going to remove about 2/1000. So you never adjust the drum. The way you adjust your depth of cut is by changing the grit. So let me make a couple more passes here when we get this board totally flat. Unless there's a question.
No, there's not a question, but somebody came in with another comment. This is
Oh.
John from North Carolina. He got a Flatmaster 15 years ago,
Oh, no way.
and during one of the wood shows, and it's a great machine, and he still uses it periodically.
That's
so
really cool.
15 years later, that's great.
We've been selling these sanders for a long time. They've changed. They look a lot different, but the overall principle is exactly the same. And as long as you have them set up right, like what I was talking about there with the 220 grit just below the table, they work really, really well, and they work really well for a really long time. So let me finish this off here. That's 4 passes. Let me do a couple more to finish this off. We're pretty close. Maybe, well, that's just. So we've got this board flat here. Now it's got some black stains over here, but the board itself, where it started, a little bit like that. Now this board, make sure we got nice clean, is flat here. It's not going to rock. That's as flat, essentially, as my table. Now, a couple other things that make this sander really interesting. You guys heard me talking about how the drum is set below the table, so you've always got that air gap between the drum and the wood. You're never forcing the sandpaper into the wood. What that means, if I'm dealing with something with a finish on it, say it has, well, a big thing these days is epoxy. If I were to sand something like epoxy on a traditional drum sander, or a belt sander, or a palm sander, when you're forcing that sandpaper into the epoxy, it's going to get warm, and when it gets warm, it gets a little bit gummy, and that gummy epoxy or finish or glue or oily wood will stick to your sandpaper, and it'll kind of plug your paper up really, really quickly. Now, because we got the drum set below the table, you're not forcing that drum into sandpaper into the wood. You've got the air gap there, so the air is a very good insulator. The wood is going to stay nice and cool. So if I got something like this that has this is just a really old varnish on it here, but if I have something like this with a finish on it, you'll see this here. When I sand it, I'm not going to load the sandpaper up with this finish because I'm not really making it hot. So let me do a couple passes on this board here just to kind of show you that. That's one pass there. You see there's no loading at all on my paper. We'll do another one here. There's my piece here. Now, something happened here. I don't know if you guys caught that, but on my leading edge right here, this is just a piece of particle board. There must have been a sliver coming out of that particle board. And what happened here is it actually tore my paper right there. So if I dig in there, it might still be in there, but there's a hunk of wood that would have tore that. Now, this leads to something on the sandpaper that's on the drum and changing the sandpaper and how all that works. Now, if you get a little tear like that, it's not the end of the world. There's a couple things you can do to kind of fix this. One would be you get some scissors and you actually just cut that tear out as nice as you can, and that's going to keep that sandpaper going for a while longer. But the other thing that you can do with the sander that's a little bit different is you can put more than one grit on it. So I could split the drum. I could have a 60 grit over here, I could have a 120 grit over here, or even in threes. So if you get a tear like that, this piece of sandpaper isn't totally garbage. I could then just cut it off here and do a split roll here. Now to change the paper, it's very, very easy. Let me just slide this fence out of the way. We'll talk a little bit about the fences in a minute here. How are we doing on time also?
It's 12:09, so.
Okay, so we are about a third of the way through.
Yep, and if anybody has any questions along the way, feel free to pop those in.
Yep.
I can.
Exactly. So this is kind of funny. My dad, well, it was over 20 years ago now. How long ago would he have designed this?
Oh,
I feel like 97 for some reason. It's sticking in my
No,
head.
it's roughly probably pretty correct.
So how long? That's over. That means 2017 was 20 years, right? Is that what that means? So,
Sure.
anyways, well over 20 years ago, my dad designed this sander. It started out as a wooden box with a top, but he was bound and determined. He wanted to call the sander the rip-off sander because the sandpaper just rips off. My mother talked him out of it, and he ended on the V-drum sander and then the Flatmaster after that. But the sandpaper is very, very easy to change. It can just be torn off. It's all on the Velcro drum here. So if I wanted a new piece of paper, I got a coarser one over here. Very, very simple. So I don't think this is a full length here. Actually, let me put this side on there. Now you'll also notice sometimes I got these sandpaper ends cut off square. What can happen if I have a corner like that? There's not a lot of Velcro left on that triangle at the very end. So what we'll often do is just cut that off square because that's going to help keep the sandpaper stuck down to the drum really nicely. And we will just roll this on here.
I do have a question, Ethan,
Sure,
from
go ahead.
somebody. I don't know
Yep.
if this is a good time, but
It's fine time.
David has a 30-inch sander,
Yep.
and he's asking about how to prevent snipe. He finds that sometimes he's getting snipe. I start the board, it grabs the other side of the table, as if the other side is a little higher.
There's two things that could be going on there. One, the drum is set a little bit too high. If the drum is set too high, that's a really simple way to get sniped with these. So make sure you have a 220 grit on your drum and you set that 220 grit just below the table. Now, while you're setting that up, take a really good look at the straight edge you're using. Now, it is possible that one side of your table is not level with the other. And you can tune with shims these tables if you need to. It depends on how old your Flatmaster is. Some of the original ones came with MDF tables, and over time they can warp. These new ones are all steel tables and they are adjustable. So there's videos on YouTube that shows you how to tune them for perfect flatness. But either drum is set too high or there's an issue with the table itself. Either way, there's some really good YouTube videos. And if you email me, or probably email is the best, I can send them a link to you right to those videos too.
Yep.
So yeah.
Our email is info@stockroomsupply.com.
Info@stockroomsupply.com, that's correct there. But yeah, there's one of those two things going on. I don't know exactly which, without it being in front of me. But now, rather than a 120 grit, I have put an 80 grit on the drum here. Obviously, this particular piece of sandpaper wasn't long enough to fill the whole drum, but I could put multiple grits on this drum if I wanted. So this sander performs a lot like a jointer. So comparing it directly to a regular overhead drum sander, it does offer a couple unique benefits. One being, there's no limit to the size of the piece I can sand. So if you have a box or a jewelry box or a chest, that can be as tall as you want, and you're still able to sand it. Now this is a really cool piece right here, where I have some end grain dovetailed tails, and the straight grained oak here. This is actually a very difficult thing to sand under normal circumstances because that end grain is a lot harder than that face grain here. Now with this drum sander, the Flatmaster, you're going to remove the same amount of material from that end grain as you would from the face grain here because the drum is set below the table. So I'll do a quick little sand here. Now we got a truck arriving in right now.
I see that. I just want to.
Can you get Jillian
Jill?
to go get Larry?
Can you go get?
Tell him to unload.
He's
He's
gonna
got
have-
to load up a lathe for us.
Yeah.
I think is what that is.
We've got a pickup for
Yeah,
a
we gotta
lathe.
pick up the disposing, so.
Of course, that happens right in the middle
Yeah,
of this.
that's better, right? So let me do a quick little sand on the ends here, and we'll see what happens. Now, if you were here, you would be able to feel that end of that end grain dovetail compared to that face grain there, and that's the exact same level. That end grain is not actually a little bit proud of that face grain, even though it's a little bit harder material here. Now, the other thing you can do that's really interesting is you can set the sanders up with a fence. Now, I have a fence on here right now. Those do two different things. One, if I'm dealing with something really, really long, you can set these fences up with the hold downs, adjust them.
So Barry, who had commented earlier,
Yeah.
the first comment, he uses his on serving trays, which is really good. So that's in reference to what you were just.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And that's where the sander really excels on anything that's flat. So cutting boards, serving trays, raised panel doors, boxes, and it does a lot of things a typical sander struggles with. So if I'm doing something really, really long, the key to the sander is to keep consistent feed rate. So if I were to stop right there, I will end up with a little bit of a mark there, because that sandpaper will just keep spinning and sand a deeper and deeper groove. But as long as you have consistent feed rate, you're going to remove the same amount of material from the entire piece. So these feather wheels, especially on the longer piece.
So the viewers have to use their imagination on how long that is right now.
Yeah, it's not very long. But if that was
Imagine it's much longer.
This is very easy to hold down and pass through, but if that was much longer, basically you put your piece in there, you just push from the back, and that's going to keep your consistent pressure down while you can keep consistent pressure forward. Makes that much easier. Now, if you are get rid of these feather wheels, and you want to do some edge sanding, the Flatmaster does an excellent job as well with that as well. So we got a nice 6-inch tall fence.
If anybody has questions, ask Ethan. He's available right now. This is a perfect time to ask questions about the sander.
It is, yeah.
We've got a nice group of people watching live right now, so that's good.
One thing I wanted to talk about too is the different sizes.
Yeah.
So this is the 24-inch I'm using. This is the most popular sander we sell. We also have an 18-inch model available. Now the main difference between the 18-inch and the 24, one is the length, but that's not the biggest difference. Obviously the 18-inch is 6 inches shorter, but also the diameter. The diameter on the 18-inch drum is about 2 inches. It's not 2-inch diameter drum, allows for a smaller gap in the top here. So with a smaller gap for small little pieces, it makes it far easier to sand. Now the 4-inch diameter drum on the 24s, basically that's going to increase the feed rate. So you can sand things twice as quickly with the bigger diameter drum as you can with a smaller 18-inch diameter drum, or 18-inch to 2-inch diameter drum there. So, yeah, generally speaking, the 24 is the most popular option. Did you have another question there, Kate? Sorry, it looked like you had a question.
There was a comment, question.
Sure.
Just a second. It's under my strap. Whoa, I have to lift
you
up
can't
the
lift
strap
it.
here. Do the hold downs still allow you to make it flat, or does it now become like an overhead drum sander?
No, the hold downs, you can never, no matter how hard you push, you can't push this wood past the table. So even if I'm pushing this wood through, I'm never going to push it past the table. So these hold downs, and even yourself, when you're pushing this wood through, you hold it down to the table, and obviously you can't go beyond the table. So those hold downs, what they do is they just hold the wood down to the table. Not beyond the table, but just to the table. So they don't change what the sander does at all. It still will make things flat. Now, I'm not going to say that this sander will make things as flat as a jointer would. It's still an abrasive sander. But we do have guys, because it's very wide, they do use it in lieu of a jointer, but it's never going to be as flat as a jointer would make it. So these are urethane wheels. So they are flexible here, and they're on bearings. These are skateboard bearings that they're on here. So these are the feather wheels that we make. The whole sander we make ourselves. The only thing that we don't make would be the nuts and bolts. The motor, we sell it with or without a motor, and I'll talk about that in a second here too. But everything else, like the top, the extrusion is done in Windsor. All these parts, the steel top and the steel frame, we have done locally here in Niagara Falls. The drum itself, we make 100% in-house here. But everything you see it's a made in Canada product, nearly through and through, other than the nuts and bolts. And the knobs. We don't make the knobs. Now, as far as the motors, we sell them with, sorry, you have a question?
No, I was just thinking, I wonder if I should come over and look at the motor while you talk about it.
Yeah, sure. Come over and look at the motor. We sell them with or without motors. The 24, we'll start with the 18. The 18, we recommend a 1/4 horsepower or more motor, 1725 RPM. 3rd horse tends to be the most popular for the 18. On the 24s, we recommend a 1/2 horsepower or more, also 1725 RPM. I have a 3/4 horse on there right now, which works quite nicely. We do sell motors. We also sell them without motors. So you may have a motor already. You may want to source a motor locally. The motors that we sell are fully enclosed farm duty motors. So they're quite a nice motor, but you don't have to buy the motor from us. Other thing I wanted to talk about, sorry, you have a question?
Somebody, yeah, this is, whoa.
Sorry.
This is John. He's got a couple comments, and the first one went up under. That's crap on me. But my biggest issue is cutting the correct angle and length for the sandpaper replacement. The ends sometimes get messed up or torn. Also getting the correct length in order to put two different sizes on the 24-inch.
Yeah.
It's an experiment. It's an experiment in frustration. Can you please create a PDF with the exact cutting angle, as well as the correct length?
Yeah, and
for full and half.
I think I may have something like that, but there's a little trick I want to show. I think it was John, right?
John, yeah.
On cutting the sandpaper. First, I want to talk about the dust collection. I just want to show you guys.
Yeah, then we can go back to that.
Dust board right there. Because the sawdust, when you're sanding, kind of gets trapped into the drum, so all the sawdust goes straight down. It's not floating up in the air. You don't need much of a dust collector to collect the sawdust off it, so the shop vac is fine. I have it hooked up to my cam vac here. But yeah, so there is dust poured on it there. As far as the sandpaper and sandpaper angle, there is, I believe, a PDF like that I'll send John. So if you can send me an email to the info@stockmansupply.com email, I do have some papers I can send you there on that. But here's a little trick for finding the angle. This is what I tend to use most often. So you're gonna have to imagine that this is a brand new piece of sandpaper. It doesn't have an angle on it already. We're gonna lay that paper perpendicular to the edge of my table. We're gonna find ourselves a straight edge here. Now, something to keep in mind is the Velcro that's on the drum is the same width as the sandpaper we're putting on the drum,
Which is 3-inch.
which is 3-inch. So what I'm going to do is I am going to line my straight edge up as close as I can to the angle of that Velcro. So that angle I just made right there is the angle of the sandpaper that I need to cut it at. So what I normally do is I will cut my, well, I'll mark that, I'll cut it, I will put that on my row here. Now this angle I have totally off, so I'm just compensating for that when I put it on. You can see that. So you see how this is not cut right, obviously. But when I get my angle cut right, I'll thread that on here. I'll get to where my half point is, which is essentially right at those heads of those bolts. I'll get my scissors and I will cut it and roll it off at the same time, and that's how I get it to the half, and then I do the same thing on that side. Though, I'll make sure we get a PDF sent to you with the angles and the length that is required.
Just send us your email,
Send
John.
us an email, we'll get that sent over to you. Yeah, and I think, I don't know off the top of my head, I think the 24-inch is a 10-degree angle, and I think the 18 is 15. But I'd have to confirm that. It might be totally wrong. Probably is totally wrong. Believe it or not, I've been wrong before in my life.
This is shocking information.
Probably one of those times. Anyway, what did I miss here? How are we doing on time? Like, we're getting
Oh
close to
yeah,
time.
it's 12:25, so about 5 minutes left.
Okay. Yeah, so, what else can we
Oh,
talk about?
actually, a question just came in.
Sure.
Oh, this is a good one.
Good question. Good.
Yeah, this is a good one.
They're all good questions.
I'm getting slight waves on the board with 100 grit. Sounds like my drum is set slightly high and is lifting board while passing over drum.
Yeah, that's exactly what the likely culprit is. So if you're getting little waves on your board, what is likely happening is you got the drum set a little bit too high. So whatever your finest grit is, 220 grit ideally, but if you don't have a 220 grit, throw whatever your finest is, whether it's 150 or 180 or even 320, but 220 is the proper grit. And you're going to want to, I have a video on YouTube that shows you exactly how to do this. So if you want a link to that video, send me an email and I'll make sure I link that over. But you want the 220 grit, not any other grit, not the 60 grit. You want the 220 grit set so that if you put a straight edge across here, there'll be an air gap between the drum, the sandpaper, and the wood here. So you should be able to, with a 220 grit, roll this. Now this is 60 grit, so this is a lot heavier, but you should be able to roll that drum and the wood not move. You may hear it scratch, and that's fine, but you shouldn't be able to move the wood by doing that then. So yeah, setup is very important. The one nice thing is once you have it, and you don't have to fiddle with it. But it sometimes can take a fair amount of fiddling at the beginning to get it just right. So yeah.
I think that when this is over, you should put a few links in like your description or
Yeah,
something
what
that
I'll
we
do is
referred to.
The things that we talk about, the videos, I'll link in the description here, so they're easy to find. So if other people in the future are watching this video, they can find them.
Those have been really
Yeah.
good questions though.
Yeah, those are
Today.
great questions. Now there is a sale going on the Flatmasters right now, so you can go on our website and check that out. We do ship them all over the U.S. and Canada. It's totally free shipping, unless you're in an unusual place like Alaska or Hawaii. But we can ship them anywhere, and it's free shipping. When you buy them, you get 2 rolls of sandpaper right off the bat. Each one of those rolls will refill the 24-inch drum about 4.5 times per roll. If you buy it without the motor, you get 2 pulleys, one for the drum, one for the motor. You get 2 feet of link belt, so that's an adjustable link belt.
We did not talk about the link
We didn't
belt.
talk about that, but that's that right there. So depending what size motor you get, you can add or remove links to make that longer or shorter. Um, if you get it with a motor, you get all the things I just mentioned plus a motor. Now you can buy the motor from us, either wired or non-wired. If you buy a non-wired motor, that's exactly how it comes with in a box. And it has an electrical box. Actually, Kate, you can come over here and look with us. Excuse me. Has an electrical box just like this, and all your wiring cords are inside there, and there's a schematic in there. If you buy it wired, we have an electrician that lives up the road from us, and he wires it in with a switch, a cord, and a plug. So basically, it's ready to go. You don't have to do any wiring at all yourself. You can, the stand I have it on is a universal lathe stand. It does not come with a stand. Normally, it'll sit on top of the bench, but if you want legs for it, we made it so that a universal lathe stand will bolt right up. So you can buy that from companies like Raycon or King or Grizzly. Pretty much anyone that sells a universal lathe stand, Flatmaster will bolt right up. So yeah, I think that's pretty well it. If anybody else has questions, feel free to email me at info@stockandsupply.com, and I'd be happy to get back to you. And I appreciate you guys all showing up and asking all the questions that you did, and I'm glad some of you already have sanders and you're already using them and having good luck with them. That's really, really cool to hear. So what I will do is on both Instagram and YouTube, this video will be posted. So if you want to watch it again in the future, you are welcome to do that. So.
And we're going to hopefully do more of these in the future too.
If there's a specific product that any of you guys want to see a live deep dive done on, send me an email and let me know, and we'll definitely make that happen in the future.
And Barry just says great information. Thanks you to you both. So
thanks, Barry. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome, and thank you for coming.
All right. See you guys later then.
I forget how to unlive it.
Use hit the X's.
Oh.